A queen sacrifice that isn't really a sacrifice. A knight that delivers check and then devours the most powerful piece on the board. And a final position so crushing, the clock never even needed to run out. This is the story of a game I played against Savior 90K. Both of us rated 838, a perfectly even matchup on paper. But what unfolded on the board was anything but even. Let me show you how a quiet Italian-style opening turned into a one-sided attack, and the exact moment my opponent handed me the game. The game opens with pawn to e4, pawn to e5, the classic double king pawn. I develop my knight to f3, my opponent brings out knight to c6, and I play bishop to c4, aiming at the Italian game family of openings. My opponent responds with knight to f6, and I play pawn to d3, keeping things solid. Black develops the bishop to c5, and I bring my other knight out with knight to c3. Now my opponent tries something a little aggressive, knight to g4, hopping the knight forward. But I simply castle, and after black castles too, I push pawn to h3, asking that knight a question. It retreats back to f6. A fairly standard opening. Both sides are developed, both kings are safe, and the position is roughly balanced. Now I develop my dark squared bishop to pawn to g5, pinning the knight against the queen. My opponent plays pawn to h6, challenging the bishop, and I retreat to h4. And here, black makes an ambitious but committal decision, g5, pushing the bishop back again. This weakens the kingside significantly. I retreat to g3, and the position is still only slightly in my favor, but those weakened pawns around black's king are going to matter later. And this is where the game starts to shift. My opponent plays pawn to d5, striking in the center. Now, this looks active, but Stockfish tells us this move hands me a clear advantage. The eval jumps significantly in my favor. Why? Because after knight takes d5, taking that pawn with my knight, and black recapturing, I play bishop takes d5. And now my bishop sits powerfully in the center, and black's position is starting to crack. My opponent plays knight to d4, but I grab the e5 pawn with knight takes e5, and suddenly I'm up a full pawn with a dominating position. The advantage is decisive. Black brings the queen to f6, trying to stay active, and I solidify with pawn to c3, kicking the knight away. The knight retreats to e6, and I push pawn to d4, building a strong pawn center. Black's bishop goes to d6, and I reposition my knight with knight to g4. The queen slides to g6, and I advance pawn to e5, gaining more space. The position is winning for me now, a decisive advantage. My pieces are coordinated, my center is dominant, and black is struggling to find counterplay. Black plays pawn to c6, trying to challenge my bishop, but this only makes things worse. I play knight to f6 check. The knight lands with a check, and the king is forced to move. King to g7. Now watch this sequence carefully. I play bishop to e4, and here's the key. My bishop and knight are both targeting black's position, and the queen on g6 is in an uncomfortable spot. Black decides to take. Queen takes e4, capturing my bishop, but this is exactly what I wanted. Knight takes e4. My knight takes the queen. I've won black's queen for just a bishop. The material advantage is enormous. With the queen gone, the rest is about converting. Black plays bishop to c7, and I jump my knight to d6, an aggressive outpost. Black takes with bishop takes d6, and I recapture with pawn takes d6, creating a dangerous passed pawn on the 6th rank. Black's rook comes to d8 to challenge it, and I play bishop to e5 check. The king is under fire again. Black blocks with pawn to f6, and I retreat the bishop to g3. Now my opponent's knight hops to f4, and I'm happy to trade. Bishop takes f4, and black recaptures pawn takes f4. I bring my queen to h5, eyeing the weakened kingside. Black's rook takes the d6 pawn, rook takes d6, recovering some material. I centralize with rook to e1, doubling my rooks on the e-file. Black develops the bishop to e6, and I play pawn to g3, trying to open lines. Black's rook shifts to d5, and I reposition the queen to f3. Black takes my h3 pawn with the bishop. Bishop takes h3, grabbing a pawn. But I have something much bigger in mind. Rook to e7 check. My rook crashes into the 7th rank with check. The king is pushed back to f8, and now I double up. Rook to e1. Both rooks stacked on the e-file, one already on the 7th rank. Black plays rook to g5, but the position is completely overwhelming. I play queen to e4, and black pushes pawn takes g3, trying to create counterplay with the passed pawn. But it's too late. Queen to h7. The queen slides to h7, and Stockfish confirms. There is a forced mate on the board. Black plays pawn takes f2 check, and I step aside with king to h2. Black retreats the bishop to e6, but I play rook takes e6, capturing the bishop with my rook. The position is utterly crushing. A queen and 2 rooks against 2 rooks and a handful of pawns, with black's king completely exposed. And at this moment, my opponent's clock runs out. The game ends on time, but the position was already decided. A forced win was on the board. So what can we learn from this game? 3 things. First, pushing pawns in front of your king, like g5, can look aggressive, but it creates permanent weaknesses that a prepared opponent will exploit. Second, when you're ahead in material, especially when you've won a queen, don't rush. Centralize your pieces, double your rooks, and let the pressure build. And third, sometimes the most dangerous moves are the quiet ones. b4 didn't look like much, but it set up the entire queen win. The flashy move was knight's trick e4, but it was the calm setup that made it possible. Look for those quiet moves in your own games. They're often the ones that decide everything. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to see more games analyzed move by move, consider subscribing to the channel. Every game has a story, and I'd love to share the next one with you. Until then, take care and play good chess.